Hi guys. Long time no see. Obviously, I haven't posted anything since the House of the Dragon Season 2 finale. That was for a multitude of reasons, but a while ago I posted a community post asking anyone if they had any questions for me, and since it's been like 2 months since I posted that, I figured I might as well get around to it and actually answer the questions. So the basic setup that I have here is I'm going to start with questions about House of the Dragon that don't include spoilers, then do a Song of Ice and Fire related questions that don't include spoilers. So if you want to avoid spoilers, obviously I'm going to put this in chapters, and you should be able to watch the beginning of the video without having any problems. Then I'm going to do House of the Dragon questions that include spoilers and a Song of Ice and Fire questions that include spoilers. And some people ask me some personal questions, which I can totally answer, and that's going to be at the very end. Obviously, I'm going to mark these down on the chapters, but just FYI, if you're listening to this and not looking at the screen, that's the deal. Okay, so the first non-spoilery question I have for House of the Dragon is, who had the best character arc this season? It doesn't have to be a character you really like, just interesting developments. I feel like Aegon maybe had one of the best arcs of the season in terms of I felt like the character was pretty consistent. We obviously got a more sympathetic look into him as a character, and considering that there weren't a ton of characters that were internally consistent this season, he was a standout. Obviously, I'm going to go against the grain, as usual, and say that Criston Cole, again, I actually think that he had a pretty good character arc this season. I felt like his character motivations were always understandable and consistent. And I also liked Daemon's. I like Daemon's from a character development standpoint. I think that it was a mistake to have him basically just going on this crazy trip for the entire season. But in terms of driving his character forward and giving him more dimension, especially outside of his relationship with Rhaenyra, I thought they did a pretty good job of that. Do you think any of the characters have been ruined this season? No, I think obviously we're only halfway through the show, so I'm never going to write off the possibility of characters who had a bad season 2 rallying and becoming better later on. Again, relatively speaking, Aemond was definitely the most disappointing character arc for me, because I felt like he just really radically changed in ways that they didn't adequately explain. I don't understand how you go from the end of season 1 and he regrets killing Luke and he kills someone for the first time, and then all of a sudden he's trying to kill his own brother and he's burning down entire villages and just going nuts. It doesn't make any sense. What are your favorite scenes of the season? Why? I thought the Battle of Rook's Rest was pretty good, even if there were certain, I enjoyed Aemond in that scene, even though I didn't enjoy later on that they were just oh yeah, he was totally trying to set his brother on fire and kill him. That's very strange to me. But the scene of Criston coming upon Aegon and Sunfire was the scene that resonated with me emotionally more out of anything. I think obviously Fabian really killed that, but I think in terms of the way that they have developed those characters and really integrated Criston into the Greens and their family, the horror of him seeing that happen to one of the children that he essentially raised and trained and tried to protect for his entire life has got to be really hard, especially when we're literally talking about it's the first battle. And again, I liked Criston fine in season 1, but I just thought that they had some very solid scenes with him. And one of the ones that I definitely liked a lot was when he was talking to Alicent about the true horror of dragon battle, that it was just, a massacre. Favorite House of the Dragon episode, least favorite House of the Dragon episode, best episode versus worst episode of House of the Dragon. My favorite episode is Driftmark. I obviously tend to be more interested in characters and character development than almost anything else, and I felt like that was a really masterful piece of television writing, in that we have almost every significant character in the same place, in the same scenes, and as the narrative progresses, as things happen, we can understand what every single character is thinking, what their motivation is, why they're reacting the way that they do, and it makes sense in terms of how that propels them forward into the Dance of the Dragons. As far as least favorites, maybe the season 2 finale. I know there's probably like recency bias here, but it was very, flaccid. Just very waiting for something to happen, and the only things that happened were weird and bad and not very entertaining. What change from the books did you like the most, and which did you dislike the most? Change from the books that I liked the most was the change to Aemon's character. I felt like that was really good, at least in season 1. I felt like they did a really good job of developing his character and relating that to the character that we hear about in the books, because obviously in Fire and Blood, we're not seeing Aemond in real life. We only know about the legend of Aemond Targaryen. So seeing the complexity of his character being built up, and then seeing how that would make sense in terms of the way that he is recorded in history, even though it's not accurate to the person that he was. I felt like in terms of an adaptation, that was like their strongest moment. What I dislike the most, probably at this point, is that they made Rhaenyra and Alicent the same age and made them best friends. Because I feel like at this point, they're really writing Alicent around Rhaenyra, and they're really trying to hammer home this connection between them that doesn't make sense. It's a weird way of presenting things, because it's Alicent is weirdly obsessed with Rhaenyra, and they have this super faith in each other for what? You're basically talking about two high school besties who grow up and are middle-aged and are I don't care about my actual family. I don't care about my children as much as this person that I had a connection with 20 years ago. It doesn't make sense to me. What are you looking forward to, and what are you dreading next season? I am looking forward to, a longer season. I felt like that was kind of a weak point, and I hope that they're going to actually do 10 episodes. What am I dreading? After George R. R. Martin's post, everything. I don't know. It seems like we might be in trouble. Do you feel like Season 2 Alicent is incongruent with Season 1 Alicent? I didn't, obviously different from the book, but relative to Season 1, it wasn't jarring. I guess yes and no, because I feel like Season 2 Alicent was inconsistent. So certain elements of her characterization lined up with her Season 1 characterization, and then certain elements didn't, just because she was so all over the place. Who do you think are the best and worst written characters in the show? For me, Mysaria is definitely the worst, in that the rules of the world seem to bend around her, and it's very clear that she's a mouthpiece for the writers rather than a person who exists in this world. I think that's actually, a pretty astute observation. I didn't consider her as a writer insert, but I can see where you would get that, and I don't think that's necessarily inaccurate. And I agree that a lot of the elements of her storyline are very strange. So as for the best written character, Otto, maybe? Again, I feel like a lot of my favorites from Season 1 had a really bad Season 2, so it's kind of hard to judge. The worst written, probably Bela and Reyna, in terms of like they just get nothing. How do you feel about Helena in the show? In my opinion, she feels more like a plot device than a character. I was also disappointed she wasn't allowed to grieve. Her answering that she has no right to mourn when small folk children perish every day felt so liberal arts graduate. Agreed. I felt, obviously, again, probably going to be a recurring theme. I thought she was a lot more of a character in season 1, and now it does kind of feel like, you know, she's just sort of there. I mean, even sometimes in the most literal sense of like, okay, she's literally like telling Aemond his fate, and she's having some like psychic link with Daemon telling him his fate. Like, bro, maybe she has other concerns besides giving a heads up to the dude who beheaded her child, or, you know, had her child beheaded. What did you think about the Aegon-Aemond interactions? Do you feel that they justify Aemond's shift from melancholy about Luke's accidental killing to unapologetic fratricide attempt? Did Aegon's bullying appear more like typical sibling ribbing to you, or more like it was hiding a genuine desire to belittle? For all his faults, Aegon seemed the only one standing up for Aemond after Luke's death, dismissing Alicent when his brother wanted to take part in the council. Does Book Aemond have actual loyalty and love for his brother? What about Show Aemond? If not for Ewan and Tom's comments, the love bit did not really come across, in my opinion. Yeah, I think they're like nuts. Again, I feel like it was just such a radical shift from, obviously they didn't get along in the first season, but it's just a very, I feel like it would have worked a lot better if they made Aemond's actions seem more impulsive or unintended, because I feel like there was an opening for that to happen, in that, like, okay, so Aegon just shows up on the battlefield when Aemond is completely not expecting it. So for him not to react immediately, or for him to like be pissed off that his brother's there, that would kind of make sense. I also think like one of the things that's weird to me about that is like Aemond injuring Aegon would make sense in that these are all dragon riders, but they have never used dragons in war. Like, they don't know how to aim them. They don't know how to use them as a weapon. They are literally a deterrent to keep control over Westeros, but they've never used them in the way that they're using them now. So for something horrific to happen, that would totally make sense. How did you interpret Helena's joke at the family dinner about your husband only paying attention to you when he's had something to drink? Do you think it hides something darker? What do you think makes her take Aegon's side this season? Is one brother more fixable than the other? Obviously there is room for a dark interpretation of that, but I tend to think of it like how we saw Aegon act when he found Aemond in the brothel. Like, that drunk Aegon is just obnoxious and kind of a bully. Not that he's like doing horrific things to Helena when she doesn't want him to. Hopefully. Is one brother more fixable than the other? No, I guess. I mean, like, I guess maybe Daeron, for what we've heard, is more fixable. So much of the YouTube videos from different people about this season of House of the Dragon have been so similar, usually just recounting things that happened in the episode, explaining what that might mean, noting changes from the books, and including behind-the-scenes remarks about the intentions of the filmmakers as they made it into the show. What's been missing in the commentary department is a discussion of the TV show as a work of art and a product, rather than just as a sequence of events or an adaptation. So here's my questions. Do you feel like this show succeeded or failed as a work of art? And honestly, was this season of TV worth 3 months of HBO Max? So yeah, I think that obviously these are really complex questions. There's not like a yes or no answer. In terms of succeeding or failing as a work of art, I think it succeeded in the sense that the writers created the show that they wanted to make. I don't think it necessarily succeeded that well as an adaptation, obviously, because they made a lot of what really felt like unnecessary changes. And I mean, the second season went well in terms of ratings and viewership and whatever. So presumably casual viewers enjoyed it, but the fandom had a lot of bones to pick. So again, it's a mix of succeeding and failing. And was it worth 3 months of HBO Max? Sure. Yeah, I guess. Where do you think the extreme animosity towards Kristen Cole in the fandom stems from? Seriously, I cannot wrap my head around this. A lot of people take it as far as hating on Fabian for the role. It's quite jarring because he's one of my personal faves. Yeah, agreed, and I sort of don't know. Other than that, like, a lot of times these things just kind of like the ball gets rolling and then it keeps going. If a character starts generating negativity, they can almost build like a negative fandom. And I know everyone's going to think like, oh, typical me saying this, but it could also be driven by the fact that like, Kristen is one of the only like non-white coded characters in the series, and Fabian is Jewish. So, there's that. Did everyone just forget about Jaehaerys? Yes. What are your thoughts on how the show did Blood and Cheese, and what would you do differently, the same, if you were a main writer on the show? I think they wasted way too much time on Blood and Cheese. Like, I get what they were kind of trying to do there, but again, it's like, I feel like it sort of not necessarily talks, I guess it lowers the expectations of the audience to understand what's going on, I guess, because like it obviously telegraphs if we're suddenly following these two people that we've never seen before, obviously something significant is coming. Like it's not necessarily the most intense way to build things up. I've talked about this before, but there's certain kind of unwritten rules about how you deal with child death in media. So I wasn't surprised that they didn't show it. But I mean, for God's sakes, having Alicent and Kristen in bed together while that was happening, that is what I would change. That was so idiotic and weird and creepy. And like, okay, so we need to sex shame Alicent again and imply that she is responsible for the death of her grandson. And I feel like that was also... So I think that obviously the show treats the Blacks as the protagonists. And as a result of that, they tend to not give the Greens the opportunity to become sympathetic characters. And I think when it came to Blood and Cheese, they did that again. They didn't show Helena's trauma, and they didn't let Alicent be a part of it. And obviously, again, this isn't necessarily a problem just with the Greens, but like ending the episode with Jaehaerys dying and then starting the episode after everyone has already found out, it's like, dude, this is literally what we want to see in the adaptation. We want to see how these characters react. We want to see what is going on. Don't just drop us into the aftermath of the biggest events in the story. So that is what I would change. In Fire and Blood, neither the Blacks nor the Greens' claim were positioned as more valid than their opponents. But in the show, they're obviously trying to make it seem that only Rhaenyra has a valid claim and only the Blacks are right. How do you think this has damaged the TV show? Do you think sticking with the original gray morality of the book would have been a better narrative choice? Yes, I think it would have been a better narrative choice. I think it would have been more entertaining, but I think that they were afraid to do that. I think that after Game of Thrones and the twist with Dany and how that landed so badly, they wanted to have a clear villainous faction that, like, the audience didn't have to question. But I think obviously that makes it considerably more boring. Okay. Love your videos. I wanted to ask about why the vast majority of the fan base is so heavily in favor of the Blacks. When I say this, I mean a major blind support with no nuance or questioning about her motives. They just accept everything she does at face value with no deeper thought process. Personally, I think it's because of showrunner bias and them not reading the source material critically. Hence, they cut characters like Nettles. Wanted to know your thoughts on this topic. I don't necessarily think it's a lack of critical thinking. I think it's like they did the calculus in terms of how to make this a successful TV show and realized that, you know, making an obvious protagonist and obvious antagonist would uncomplicate things in a way that, you know, would hopefully guarantee just a more successful but easily digestible show. The show, at least as I watched it, seems determined to strip, especially its female characters, of agency throughout the season. e.g. Daemon pledging to Rhaenyra because the A Song of Ice and Fire vision of Dany, or Rhaenyra repeatedly complaining, "What would you have me do all season?" Or making incidents like Blood and Cheese or Shipbreaker Bay accidental. Why do you think they've changed this aspect of the characters from the book? I think obviously when it comes to characters like Daemon and Rhaenyra especially, they're obviously concerned they don't want to turn the audience on their leading characters, at least not at this point. And I also think, they don't... I mean, not to harp on the Dany thing, but I just feel like they don't want to risk that ever happening again because it almost killed the franchise. And ironically, they're really watering down the material that they have to work with because of that concern. And I don't know if to be fair, that could be driven by HBO more than the writers themselves. But that's what I think it is. What, if anything, do you think triggered Helena into being able to articulate her vision so much more clearly between episodes 1 and 7 and the finale? Is it just bad writing, or did something actually happen? No, I think it's just bad writing, and I think it was just it was a plot necessity. Have you studied Greek tragedy? I see Alicent and Rhaenyra as Aristotelian tragic heroines. Alicent at least has all the characteristics. What are your thoughts on that? I studied Greek tragedy in college in one course, but I don't remember it that well. So yeah, sorry I can't offer a great response to that, but I'm sure if you're probably right. When Aemond claimed Vhagar, he seemed to be a completely different person. Do you think a bit of Vhagar rubbed off on Aemond? Vhagar is a war criminal from way back, so I think people get it twisted, blaming it entirely on Aemond. Maybe they rubbed off on each other. So, yes and no. I feel like there's obviously a very significant aspect of being a Targaryen and claiming a dragon, the importance of being a dragon rider. So I don't think it was some sort of mystical Aemond's mind suddenly changed when he became a dragon rider. I think he was raised with the expectation that this is the most important aspect of being who he is, and he didn't have that. So to go from that to riding the biggest dragon in the world is obviously going to radically change. It's going to be an extremely exciting moment for him. And then similarly, obviously, his claiming Vhagar is immediately followed by him losing his eye. So that it's hard to tell what was driven by claiming a dragon, what was driven by his mystical connection with the dragon, and what was driven by losing his eye. Has your opinion changed from season 1 to season 2 with regards to the Valyrian family being black? I think the casting decision confuses people that only watch the show, who fail to understand just how close House Valyrian is to the Targaryens. I appreciate the representation, but I think the show loses out on showing that they are not just another Westerosi family to the Targaryens. I would agree. I feel like I appreciate the inclusion, and it's better than nothing, but I think that in terms of storytelling, it's not used as effectively as it could be. Also, the omission of Nettles. It's not too late for them to retcon this in season 3. Agreed. What are your thoughts on Jaehaerys, the first Targaryen, his policies, his actions, his propaganda? And why do you think the Citadel is painting him in such a positive light? I think he's a scrub. I don't like him. I think his propaganda is obviously pretty good since he's so positively remembered. As for the Citadel, I think probably they're doing it to slightly benefit themselves. What do you think about the Grand Old Town / Maester conspiracy? I think it's nothing. I think if it were easy enough to kill dragons, if all you needed was the Maesters to kill dragons, then Valyria wouldn't have been the dominant empire for as long as it was. Okay, so now we're moving on to A Song of Ice and Fire questions that don't have spoilers in them. What's your favorite house, outside of the High Towers, of course? The Starks, the Martells. I have a lot of kind of minor houses that don't get a lot of time in the sun, but that I'm just interested in for one reason or another. The Reeds, the Manderleys, the Redwynes, the Ullers. Yeah, there's just a lot. Dorne, really so progressive. Sort of. I mean, obviously not progressive from our own standards, but in comparison to Westeros and a lot of the known world. Yes, it is. What do you think of Valyria? What is George trying to say? To me, I look at Valyria more as an example of the potentially cataclysmic power of fire, in contrast to the catastrophic power of ice. Do you agree with Preston Jacobs' sci-fi theory? I actually don't think I've watched that, so I have no idea. Do you ship anyone in A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, or Fire and Blood? No. There is not anything that I can imagine as less sexy than the world of Westeros. Do you plan on doing more post-dance pre-A Song of Ice and Fire content with Dunk and Egg coming next year? Yes. Have you ever considered making character playlists or uploading and or expanding on your content in podcast form? Yeah, like if I ever feel like I have enough content to make a playlist about a certain character, yeah, I'd certainly do that. And podcasting, maybe. There's plenty of things that I would like to do in terms of creating content, but like I can barely even do just the basic stuff of like making videos regularly. So once I get that down, then yeah, I will consider other things. What do you think about all the hate Lady Catelyn Stark gets, especially from the male part of the fandom? Please answer this one because I think it's a weird phenomenon. These same people don't like Cersei, obviously, but Cersei does not get the same level of hate, vitriol, and venom that I can see Cat gets. Is it something about her particularly that is triggering to people? If I just randomly name drop Catelyn in a comment, I immediately get a plethora of responses from people saying how she's vile, etc., etc. I don't even get that response with Ramsay freaking Bolton or Joffrey, but just name drop Catelyn and all of a sudden all these people come crawling out of the woodwork to say how she's the devil incarnate. It's really weird and puzzling. Yeah, I generally agree. I think, there's obviously a sexist element to it, but also, like, I think in terms of that, her actions are positioned against two very heroic characters in terms of the narrative. That she sort of is a contrast with Ned, and then is also at odds with Jon, who are very clearly telegraphed as classic fantasy heroes. So it's easy to paint her as like the evil, shrewish bitch who is just screwing everything up for the dudes who are really important. What do you make of Aegon IV's decision to legitimize his bastard children? Was it a final middle finger to the realm, or was there something deeper involved? For those of you who don't know, Aegon IV is Aegon the Unworthy. Let me Google it to make sure. And I think he's Aegon the Unworthy, and I think the explanation for that is in the name, that he is obviously ultimately remembered as someone who was unworthy of the throne. So I think that when he saw that his legacy was going to be unimportant, he tried to remedy that by giving all of his children a shot at becoming exceptional. And yeah, I mean, he's not wrong. Like, his illegitimate children were more impressive than his legitimate children. So at least in terms of that, he got like a correct read on if he wanted to be remembered as special or important, he would have to legitimize people like Bloodraven and Shira and Daemon and Aegor. Yes. Okay, so now we are moving on to House of the Dragon questions that do contain spoilers, or like my answer to them would spoil something that may not have been shown in the episodes yet. What else do you think we would have seen if HBO didn't cut the season down from 10 to 8 episodes? The Gullet, obviously. I have no idea why they decided to cut episodes, especially when it's very obvious that they were building up to a climax in episode 9 that we just didn't get, so it just built up to nothing. Do you think there is any form of course correction the writers can or will take when writing season 3? Yes, of course, I think there are course corrections they can take. Do I think that they're going to take them? Based on George R.R. Martin's statements, I don't think they're planning on it at this point. Maybe they will, now that George has spoken out, but I'm not holding my breath. If you could change 3 things about House of the Dragon, what would they be and why? I would make it a longer series so we could cover a lot of things more in depth. I would not change Alicent to be the same age as Rhaenyra and Rhaenyra's best friend, because I feel like the show is now very crippled by that. And I would not paint the Blacks as the protagonists. I would not paint them as the obvious good guys. From season 2, who's your favorite character in general, and who's your favorite on each team? For the Blacks, I guess maybe Jace. I feel like he had kind of a good season, or like what we saw. He was a lot more developed in this season than the last season, so that was a good boost. And again, I did think that Daemon had a pretty good character arc, even though they should have done more than just have him in Harrenhal losing it. And I don't know, I guess Kristen, which is like wild to say. I just feel like so many of the green characters got so shafted this season that like he was the only one where I could at least see something of merit in his character development. And Aegon, and Tom Glencarney, who is always given Aegon more than what he gets on the page. I feel like he really, worked with this season well. Do you still have any hope that Maelor will exist, or do you think they'll give his plot to Jaehaera? No, Maelor is not coming. I don't know if they're going to give his plot or his relevance to Jaehaera. I don't know what they're doing with that, but I think it's obvious that there's no Maelor. What did you think of the show's decision to make Alicent and Daemon friends? How will it affect her relationship with Aemond? I mean, I don't know that it made them friends. I feel like, constantly drugging someone in the hopes that they have some sort of mystical revelation doesn't necessarily seem that friendly. But I don't know. I mean, I love Alice. She was iconic. But I would say, in terms of how it might affect her relationship with Aemond might be more interested in her because she had a connection with Daemon, and he obviously seems to be very interested in Daemon. Do you think they ruined Alicent beyond repair, or can her character be saved? What will her plot be next season after she betrayed her family? I mean, again, we're only halfway through the series, so I don't think anything is ruined beyond repair, but I don't have the expectations that they're going to try to fix her character. I think that she is a piece of Rhaenyra's puzzle. And I assume her plot next season will be that she's imprisoned by Rhaenyra, because Rhaenyra thinks, oh, Alicent tricked me, because Aegon isn't here when he was supposed to be, and she agreed that I could kill him. So yeah, I don't have high hopes for her next season storyline. Do you believe that anyone can claim a dragon, or they need to have Valyrian blood? No, I think anyone can claim a dragon. I think that the Dragon Lords specifically gave themselves a leg up on this, but I think anyone can do it. Will Daemon and Otto come to an understanding in Season 3? No. How would you handle Alicent's character going forward? I felt Episode 8 was damaging to her character since it made Alicent betray her core values for the sake of a very poorly thought-out plan. And what realistically do you think the writers have planned for her if she maintains her current trajectory? Yeah. I thought Alicent in Episode 8 sucked. And I think, I think they probably have the plan going forward to essentially narratively punish her for being like an agent of the patriarchy because she chose her own son over her childhood friend. And you can tell what I think about that. Can Larys be trusted with taking Aegon away alone? What are Larys's motivations, and is he a hindrance or a help to the Greens, or is he purely self-serving? I think he's self-serving and sees that the Greens are a good means of getting more power, and I think that's why he can be trusted. That's why he can be trusted with taking Aegon, because Aegon is a much safer bet than Aemond, and obviously Alicent doesn't care about him in the way that he wants her to, and Otto's probably going to see through his stuff. So, not to be mean to Aegon, but like he's safe with Larys because Aegon is the easiest person to control and the easiest way for Larys to gain more power. Do you think Rhaenyra will be given a proper descent to villainy arc in the future, or will she be portrayed as a poor, undeserving victim? I actually have hopes. That is like literally the only thing that I liked about the kind of back half of season 2 is I felt like they actually did a pretty solid job of building up that, the potential of Rhaenyra buying into her own mythology. What do you think of the show validating the myth of Valyrian blood? We see only potential Valyrian blood dragon seed riders, with the show even dancing with Ulf being a Valyrian somewhere. It also seems like Daemon, Helaena, and Viserys are dragon dreamers because of their blood. Are Valyrians superior to all, as the show might make us believe? I don't think the show is necessarily aiming for that because Jace kind of directly said, like, oh, you know, the Targaryens built up their own mythology and history to make themselves seem more important. So even having the dragon seeds be of Valyrian descent, like, it's not communicating that Valyrians are necessarily super special because of their blood, because the only people that Rhaenyra asked to try to become dragon riders were of Valyrian descent. Like, if she had brought any old person to come try to claim a dragon, we don't know if that would have worked, because, again, she didn't try to do that. She solely sought out illegitimate Targaryens to make the attempt. What do you think Alice Rivers' backstory is? I don't know. I mean, I like the idea. Obviously, she has a deep connection to the Riverlands, which I think is rad. So I think she's potentially older than she looks. I think it would make sense that she is an illegitimate strong, but I also feel like, you know, she could be just like a random person who sort of ingratiated herself into the politics of the Riverlands because she has magical powers. But who knows? Do you think Mysaria was lying to Rhaenyra about her backstory? I have no idea. I mean, it didn't occur to me that she was when watching it, so I watched it with the assumption that she was telling the truth. Do you think there's any chance Alicent was bluffing and setting some kind of trap for Rhaenyra? Because otherwise, I have no idea what the F they're thinking. No, I don't think she is. I think that the show is trying to set it up for Rhaenyra to think that she was, and then justify Rhaenyra imprisoning Alicent because she felt that she was deceived. How big of a mistake was it to cut out Nettles, and how will Rhaena fit that role? Also, do you think Nettles will be in Season 3? Plus, do you think fans can make an impact, like in order to make Nettles appear on the show somehow? I really don't know, because I felt like, again, it's weird because obviously we know that there was another 2 episodes, so my obvious guess would be that Rhaena would claim Sheepstealer in episode 9, and that just happened to be cut off. But the way that they ended it actually does leave an opening for Nettles to possibly come in season 3. Like, again, for all we know, Rhaena could just look at Sheepstealer and Sheepstealer could leave, and then some, you know, or even like Sheepstealer could go find Nettles. Like it's not beyond possibility that Nettles already claimed Sheepstealer and is with Sheepstealer in the Vale. I don't think that's what's going to happen. But again, like the show left it much more open-ended than I would have thought. So if they do decide to radically change season 3, who knows? But again, I very, very highly doubt they're going to incorporate Nettles. Is Sunfire really dead? Aegon said Sunfire is dead, so how is the whole end of a certain character going to happen? Because I was actually looking forward to seeing that happen the way it went down in the book. I have no clue. That was one of the things that definitely, like, even as like a film analytical person, I couldn't tell what the show was trying to communicate. Like, I didn't understand if they, so the fact that they reiterated that Sunfire was dead, I feel like, you know, normally you wouldn't repeat something like that unless you want to make it really clear to the audience that this is what happened. So I don't know if they're setting that up for like a big shocker reveal that like, oh, actually Sunfire is alive, or if they actually killed Sunfire for God knows what reason. Maybe because it's cheaper, they don't have to make a CGI Sunfire again. That was one of the most confusing elements of season 2 for me. So I honestly didn't like the source material from the book. I think the dance wasn't all that well written. book characters in that arc don't really have an arc. If you had written that bit of Westerosi history, how would you have done it, and how would you tie it into the main books? Yeah, I generally agree. And I think, it's very, it's written like a history, so it doesn't feel like you're necessarily reading about characters with an arc. But, if it were up to me, if I could write any part of Westerosi history, it would not be the history of the Targaryens. I know, shocker. So, as it was now, it was, an adequate bit of backstory to explain why the dragons weren't there, for me, personally. Okay, so now we are moving on to A Song of Ice and Fire questions that involve potential spoilers for House of the Dragon, I assume. I don't know. I organized these questions like weeks ago and then forgot about it because of personal things. So, yes, okay. What are your thoughts on the whole Empire of the Dawn thingy? It seems to be basically everywhere in the world of Ice and Fire and dominates every discussion around Children of the Forest and Long Night stuff. I've never heard you talk about it, yet I am interested in what a contrarian, a real zinger here, I know, as you might say. I've actually done a video about this, and basically I think that the Targaryens are descendants of the Bloodstone Emperor, and Hightowers are descendants of the Amethyst Empress. And hence, that is their connection to Westeros as it is now. If you were to ask George a question and he had to answer on what his canon answer would be, no vague, some might say it was this and some might even say, what would it be? I.e., did Lyanna really fall in love with Rhaegar and wanted to join him on his quest to birth the Azor Ahai, Ubermensch, Kwisatz Haderach? Fair question. God, I don't know. I guess maybe, like, which magical histories of certain houses are true and which are false. Maybe. That's the only thing I can think of off the top of my head right now. What are your thoughts on the Grand Northern Conspiracy, Robb's will? I don't think there's a Grand Northern Conspiracy. I think that just the Boltons suck. And there are suspicions that there may be living Starks out there, so a variety of different people in the North are like, let's get rid of these a-holes and reinstate the not a-holes. Robb's will, I think, there's a good chance that it's talking about Jon, but also, like, George intentionally didn't tell us who was actually listed as Robb's heir in the will, so that's always, like, if the answer is the obvious answer, why not just tell us that now, rather than trying to make it into a mystery that's not a mystery, so maybe it's somebody else. Love your videos. You always make great content in A Song of Ice and Fire. I have a question about the concept of prophecy in Targaryen dynasty. Like, we introduced it to the show, and from the books, we know that Rhaegar found out about something similar in the library and changed his behavior and mindset forever. I, again, as like the certified Targaryen hater that I am, I don't think there are a lot of prophecies about the Targaryens. I think that they, based on their family values and the way that they're raised, they read prophecies and are like, oh, the Targaryens are the most important people ever, and this could apply to me, so therefore it is about me. But in reality, I don't think a lot of the things that they think are about them are actually about them. Okay, and so now we're on some personal questions about me, Hillary. So you mentioned having a degree in writing, I think. Is there anything you wrote or are currently writing on? So no, I actually don't have a degree in writing. When I was in college, I double majored in critical film studies and psychology. Obviously, I don't use my psychology degree in real life that much, but critical film studies is more so, about watching film or visual artworks and analyzing them from different perspectives. So it does entail a lot of writing and looking at things from a different point of view. Job outside of YouTube. I am an editor of the written word, like for entertainment newsy kind of stuff. Hope it's okay to ask, but what do you do for a living? Again, I'm an editor now. I used to do like entertainment writing, but now do mostly editing and only write when there's no one else around to write something that needs to be put up immediately. What's your favorite food? Kind of like boring, but Probably pizza. My favorite like genre of food is probably Indian or Mexican. I've been a vegetarian since I was like 12. So any food that is robust in flavor and is also vegetarian is always going to be a big hit with me. Dog or cat person? I am a cat person. I mean, I love dogs. I would like to have a dog if I had like the time and space and yard to have a dog. But I have cats, and I definitely love cats, and I hate people who drag cats, because cats are wonderful and amazing and deserve to be as beloved amongst the public as dogs are. How do you have so many amazing takes? Thank you. I never socialize with anyone or leave my house. Favorite movie right now? Dune Part 2 and Dune Part 1. Obviously, that's fairly old now. Those, like, it's going to be very hard to top those for me for a very long time. But, so I have the AMC A-List subscription, which is for like 3 tickets to movies a week, if you don't know. So I actually do see a lot of movies in theaters, and a lot of them are good. I loved Long Legs. I know it wasn't everybody's thing, but it was just like, it was the vibe. And T-Rex, their album Electric Warrior, is like one of my favorite albums of all time, and I hadn't listened to it in forever. And if you don't know, that plays a significant role in their music, plays a significant role in Longlegs, so it reinvigorated my love for them. And it was just, like I said, it was just like everything, the cinematography, the music, the aesthetic, the time period, the characters, it just, like, the vibe totally worked for me. I also saw, what's it called? The Beast Within. Kit Harington's new movie that like got 0 attention and bad reviews, and I'm shocked it got bad reviews because I actually really enjoyed it. It was one of those movies where like every frame looks like a picture, and it was a little predictable, but I I liked it a lot. And Kit's performance slayed. But yeah, obviously, given that I have a degree in film, I watch a lot of films, so it takes a lot for one to like stand out to me necessarily, but it also doesn't take a lot to satisfy me. There are a lot of movies that are just fine and are worth the watch, even if they're not the best movie ever made. What's your favorite series outside of A Song of Ice and Fire? I mean, it was Harry Potter, unfortunately, but I've, moved on from that one. What are some of your other favorite books, shows, movies outside of the GRRM verse? Shows, I'm kind of like a vampire girly. Like, love the Vampire Diaries before it crashed and burned. Love Buffy, love Angel. Movies, again, the Dune movies. I am in like I have been in the midst of reading Dune, the books, for like ages, and have not finish them because I don't read often for recreation, which is sad, but I literally spend 40 hours a week reading and editing content. So, it's not always the first thing on my list to do after I've read for 8 hours straight. And I'm actually in the midst of a Song of Ice and Fire reread. Because I figured, I wanted to recenter and maybe find some new angles for content creation, and just like to see more of the hidden depths that I missed or forgot. Am I your only Daenerys loyalist fan? Maybe. I'm thinking maybe, but probably not. Like, I feel like one person in the 20,000 has to be a Daenerys fan and just like ignores my Dany videos. Honestly, like the amount of attention that I get for my Dany videos is wild. Like, I know that she obviously has a big fandom, but you would think that like my channel revolved around hating Daenerys Targaryen as a character, when like I don't have proportionally that many videos about her. I just happen to be critical of her in a way that I guess other people aren't. Are you a fan of Halo? It's my favorite video game series of all time. If I ever hit 1,000 subs, I plan to do a What If the UNSC Discovered Planetos. If you haven't played Halo, the UNSC is the military branch, the United Nations Space Command. Yeah, I actually know literally nothing about Halo other than when I was in high school, like my guy friends would have Halo parties, and like play Halo in like giant groups, and I was not about that life. But I assume, obviously, given that they all love to play it, that it was probably fun-ish. I'm not like a huge gamer. I really only play like kind of vintagey games or games that are related to things that I already like Star Wars or something. Okay, so I think that is the answer to every question that I got asked. Hopefully the world of Ice and Fire will get more exciting. And if it doesn't, we'll all just soldier on and find some other fantasy land to inhabit. Definitely hoping that George R.R. Martin's like high-key shade inspires change, though. Like, obviously, he had to be pretty torqued up to say that, and hopefully that drag will change the bad direction that House of the Dragon could be going in. So yeah, I will be back sometime soon-ish. I mean, soonish in like, I don't know, within a month, hopefully, making an actual analytical video. And I don't know when you're going to see my face the next time, but thanks for all of the questions and even like caring about my opinions whatsoever. All right, see you guys later. Have a good one. Bye. Bye.